Namo Buddhaya, Namo Amitabha. Hello everyone. So today I feel like talking about the Four Noble Truths. Now for those who are familiar with the Buddha's teachings, then most people will know about the Four Noble Truths. So what did the Four Noble Truths say? First, there is suffering in life. And second, there is the cause of suffering. Luckily, the Buddha did not just stop there. And the Buddha also told us there is the cessation of the suffering and there is a path that leads to the end of suffering. So I want to talk about the Four Noble Truths in maybe 3 videos because I really want to discuss it in details. So first, let's look at the first Noble Truth. There is suffering in life. And when we study this, we'll know that these are the truths not just because the Buddha said so, not just because the Buddha said they are the truth, then they are the truth, but these are really the objective truth for ordinary beings. Unless you are an enlightened being, that you have realized emptiness and you have transcended all sufferings in life. If not, this is the truth for all of us, and we will know when we look at the Four Noble Truths, when we examine it in details. So first, there is sufferings in life. What kind of sufferings? Buddha talk about the 8 types of suffering, or sometimes also the 3 types of suffering, which let's go through them in details. First, there is the suffering of birth, the suffering of old age, the suffering of sickness, and the suffering of death. So it's easy to comprehend that old age, sickness, and death are suffering for us, but how come birth is also suffering? To most people, birth is like a celebration. But actually, if we talk about the period of pregnancy for the women, and also the process of giving birth for the women, and also for the baby, there is actually a lot of suffering, a lot of pain throughout this process. I think for those who have been mothers, they would know very well how the process of pregnancy and also leading up to giving birth, the whole process, actually there is a lot of suffering for the mother and also for the child. So in the sutra on entry into the womb, for those who are interested in learning about the human gestation, the different stages, go and read this sutra. Extremely fascinating. In that the Buddha described this process in a lot of details, much more details than even modern day scientists. Not only the Buddha described the details of the physical pain that will bring to the baby in the womb, and also to the mother. And the Buddha also described the mental activities of the baby in the womb. So there is actually also a lot of suffering, not only for the mother, but also for the baby in the womb. Think about it, he or she had been trapped in this little space for such a long time. And when it came out from such a tiny space, a tiny hole. That's why when all the babies were born into this world, they were all crying like hysterically, because it's really a painful process for the baby and also for the mother. So that's why birth is also suffering, objectively speaking. Of course, when we see a new life born, then there's joy. But before that, there is also suffering for the mother and the child. So the suffering of birth, old age, illness, and death. There is also the suffering of separation from the loved ones. So for those who have been in relationships, then they will know it's also painful to separate from the loved ones. And there's also the suffering of meeting with those who you hate, or being with those who you hate. And sometimes in our life, maybe in your job or in your family, there are people you dislike, but you have to be with them, or you have to work with them. You cannot really separate from them. So that's also a type of suffering. Also, not getting what you want is also a type of suffering. In life, we don't often get what we want. And lastly is the suffering arised from the 5 skandhas. So the 5 skandhas, skandhas means aggregates. All these are aggregates are coming together, and the 5 skandhas are referred to the forms, the feelings, the perceptions, the mental activities, and the consciousness. So the forms are about the phenomena, all the physical phenomena that we can see, including our physical bodies. And the other 4, the feelings, perceptions, mental activities, and consciousness, I really refer to our mental state. So it's the physical and the mental. All these 5 skandhas can also bring us a lot of suffering. For instance, the physical body, we talk about suffering of old age, sickness, and other conditions. For instance, when we experience physical pain with this body, and also the other 4 are mental elements that we can also experience suffering in our daily life. For instance, if we have emotions or negative feelings, perceptions, our attachment, and our separation. So all these 5 skandhas can also bring us a lot of suffering. So sometimes the Buddha also categorized the sufferings into 3 types. First is the suffering of pain, dukkha. So this includes the physical suffering and also our mental sufferings. For instance, when we experience pain in our body, this brings us suffering. And second is the suffering of change. So the suffering of change is when we obtain something that we really like, and we obtain pleasures from this thing. However, when things change, when the person no longer loves you, then you also experience suffering, because all is impermanent. There are always changes in life. And the third is the suffering of existence, sometimes also called the all-pervasive suffering. So this is kind of like a background suffering. If there is existence, there is also suffering, because the truth is that all things are impermanent in nature. Because of our ignorance, of our not understanding this truth, we cannot really see the truth clearly. So we try to be attached to things or to grab hold of things that are just impermanent in nature, and we think that they are long-lasting, and hence we suffer. So there's really all these sufferings in life, and these are really the truth. And not just because the Buddha said they are suffering and they are the truth, but really they are indeed the truth, that objective truth for ordinary beings. And hence, that's why they call the 4 Noble Truths. So in our next video, we'll discuss the cause of suffering, what leads to the cause of suffering. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Amitabha.